Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Green Voices podcast series. In all honesty, I think we spend way too much time looking at maps of cities and not enough time looking at what is actually happening to the earth itself. In this first episode, we're going to talk about the disappearing green spaces in Ukraine. It's something that most people don't really see on the news because they're focused on buildings and not nature. I'm only 16, but I really want a future where nature isn't just something I read about in old history books. Ukraine is famous for its steppes and huge ancient forests. But right now, a lot of these green areas are turning into what I'd call a scarred landscape. So first of all, why should we even care about a few trees? Forests are basically the planet's natural climate system. They absorb carbon dioxide and give us the oxygen we need. But because of constant shelling and explosions, thousands of hectares of forests are burning. And here's the worst part. Firefighters often can't even reach these fires because the ground is full of landmines. So the forests just keep burning until there is nothing left except black ash and bad soil. Scientists say around 30% of Ukraine's protected nature has already been damaged. That's a huge part of the planet's lungs slowly shutting down. But it doesn't stop with the forests. There's also something called soil compaction. I know it sounds like a boring school term, but it's actually really serious. Think about it. Thousands of heavy tanks and armored vehicles moving across the same fields every day. Over time, they press the soil so hard that it starts to act almost like concrete. When that happens, rainwater can't sink into the ground properly, and plants struggle to grow. Slowly, the land starts losing its ability to support life. The green turns into a gray, dry surface where almost nothing can survive. And we also have the chemical damage. Every rocket strike leaves behind more than just an explosion. Toxic substances like sulfur, copper, and heavy metals stay in the soil for years. Ukraine is known for its famous black soil, one of the most fertile in the world, but parts of it are now being poisoned. And when the soil is damaged, it doesn't stay local. It affects the planet, the animals, and eventually even the food people eat. Everything is connected. When forests burn, the climate changes. When soil is damaged, ecosystems weaken. And when chemicals stay in the ground, the effects can last for decades. I know this is a lot for a first episode, but if we don't talk about it, these disappearing green spaces now, there might not be anything left to save later. Scientists are already using satellites and mapping tools to track the damage, but it's becoming a race against time. Thanks for listening to episode 1 of Green Voices. I got a lot more to share about water and waste in the next episode. So, I'll see you all in episode 2. See you later. Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of the Green Voices podcast series. In all honesty, I believe that more people should be aware of the very terrible situation that is currently taking place in Ukraine. In this episode, we are discussing the pollution in the estuaries, or what locals would refer to as the limands. Let's begin with a little query. Are you aware of the true definition of an estuary, or halaj as we refer to them in Turkey? It's much more than just the end of a river. It is the meeting point of fresh water and salt water. While Turkey is home to the well-known Golden Horn, southern Ukraine has enormous horns that are an important and completed part of their landscape. They're usually lovely and vibrant, but at this moment, turning into what's referred to as an ecocide. For simplified explanation, that means that an entire ecosystem has been completely destroyed. We really need to investigate why this is occurring because it's quite dangerous for our future. To begin with, why are these places important? Estuaries are essentially nature's enormous filters. Before the water is released into the open ocean, it is cleaned. Estuaries in Ukraine are essentially the Black Sea's lungs. The issue is that if chemicals or debris enter, they remain there because they are only partially enclosed. They don't simply disappear. They sink and become trapped. And that's precisely what's occurring right now. Poison is clogging the filters. The destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in 2023 was the largest catastrophe to date. I remember seeing it on the internet, but I was unaware that the true threat was waiting for us at the bottom. Behind that barrier, a massive layer of mud and accumulated for 70 years. It was full of hazardous metals from the Soviet era and old industrial trash, not simply dirt. All of the hazardous dirt washed directly into the Dnipro estuary when the dam collapsed. Now a thick layer of poison sits on the bottom, damaging the fishes' homes and suffocating the plants. Cleaning this up is predicted to take 50 years. That's a lot longer than I've been alive. Now, there are numerous large factories and ports on the land surrounding the ocean. Chemical storage and oil tanks have been damaged as a result of the conflict. Thousands of tons of petroleum leak into the calm estuary water when a tank is struck. Consider this. Oil forms a greasy blanket on the surface of the water. Sunlight cannot enter and oxygen cannot get through. The animals under the water simply cannot breathe. Satellite photos reveal massive brown and black stains. It appears that the water is bruised. This next section is something I had never considered before: contamination from firearms. When rockets fall into the ocean, they do not just explode and disappear. They emit toxins such as lead and mercury. In some regions, scientists discovered that a metal called barium is 6 times more abundant than it should be. The scary thing is that fish eat these chemicals, then birds eat the fish, and eventually it can even get to humans. A missile that falls in the water today will still be poisoning the area long after the war is over. Maybe the saddest part is that what's happening in cities like Mykolaiv. Because the pipes and cleaning systems are broken, all the waste from houses and hospital is going straight into the water without being cleaned first. This makes the water full of bacteria and gross algae that smells bad and uses up all the oxygen. Everything is connected, and everything I discussed today demonstrates that when one aspect of nature is harmed, the entire sea feels it. When Ukraine's estuaries become ill, the entire Black Sea loses its breath. I'm only 16, but I want a future in which the sea is genuinely healthy. If we don't talk about it and figure out how to clean it up with new technology, every country around the sea will face a major challenge. Our future is indeed at stake. So that's the story of Ukraine's damaged estuaries. And I understand it's a lot to take in, but we must change things. Thanks for listening to episode 2 of Green Voices. I've got a lot more to share, so I'll see you all in episode 3. See you later. Hello everyone and welcome back to Green Voices. In our last episode, we dived into the suffocating estuaries of Ukraine. But now we need to take a look at what's happening on the land, because what starts on the ground always finds its way to the when we think of waste, we usually think of plastic bottles or household trash. But Ukraine is currently facing a waste crisis that the world has never seen before. It's not just about messy streets, it's about what scientists call a toxic legacy that could last for generations. First, let's talk about the most visible part: construction waste. Entire cities have been turned into rubble. We're talking about millions of tons of shattered concrete and bricks. But here's the danger. Mixed into that dust is asbestos, a mineral used in all Soviet buildings that causes cancer when breathed in. Every time a ruin is moved without proper equipment, the air becomes a threat. Then there is a military waste. This is something we don't often discuss in environmental classes. Thousands of destroyed tanks and armored vehicles are rusting across the fields. They leak heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and nickel into the soil. And the unexploded ordnance, they aren't just explosive risk. They leak toxic chemicals from their casings directly into the groundwater. We also have a massive crisis with hazardous and medical waste. Because of the conflict, many waste treatment plants are destroyed or lack power. This means chemicals from factories and hazardous waste from hospitals are something being dumped without any filtration. It's a cocktail of poison saturating the earth. But why does this matter for our future? Because soil is like a sponge. Once these toxins get deep enough, they enter the food chain. The crops grown in these fields, the animal that grows there, and eventually the people, everyone is affected. Ukraine's famous black soil is being bruised and poisoned. The challenge now is to move beyond dumping and start recycling even in the middle of a war. There are projects trying to crush the concrete rubble to build new roads, and experts working to map the most contaminated zones using satellites. It's a race against time. Nature doesn't have a reset button, so if we don't address this waste now, the environmental cost will be much higher than the economic one. Our future depends on a healthy planet, and right now, a vital part of the planet is crying for help. Thanks for joining me for episode 3. Stay green and stay informed. See you later.